Be-doo. It's everyone's favorite boomer and vintage lens enthusiast. I bought this lens quite a while ago, like 6 or 8 months ago, and I did a torture test of it in some cold weather at the beginning of 2023 when it was like in the 20s or something. And this is the Nikon. This is a zoom NIKKOR, 28 to 50 millimeter, constant aperture 3.5. It's a push-pull as opposed to a tube-touch, and I'm using this collapsible lens hood on it, which really helps. It's an old lens, and even it looks clean on the inside, but even it has the slightest bit of minimal haze you can imagine. The lens hood, look how deep this lens hood is. For 50 millimeter, that's great. It blocks almost all extraneous light. Now it's a two-stage. You're supposed to be able to put it like right here and then use it for wide angle, but sometimes it doesn't go in the right spot. It seems to like the warmer it is, the better it works, and that's collapsed. So let's open it up for a minute. Back in the day, Nikon made these E-series lenses, which is supposed to be more affordable, and they called them the E-series, and they said they were made with inexpensive material. And then all people stood away from them. You know, they didn't want to have anything to do with them. So they made this lens for the E-series, but they didn't put the E on it, right? So it's a nice lens. This is one of a nice zoom lens. Like I said, it's a 28 to 50 millimeter zoom. It has an interesting thing where if you go to 50 millimeters, it goes into this macro mode, and you could get down to, what can you get down to? Feet. Well, there's 1.25 feet, so you probably get down to a foot, but only at 50 millimeters. And this is pretty good. That's pretty decent. And when you stop down to f16 and f22, it works really, really good. What do I like about this lens? Well, it has a typical build quality. There's no doubt about that. It has nice build quality. It's all metal. Now, I took this out when it was cold out. It was very cold out. It was in the 20s, the low 20s. And as usual, I drove somewhere and it was in the car. When I got out, it went through temperature equilibrium, and the metal contracts at a different rate to the glass. And then I was shooting wide open at f3.5, and there's a lot of aberrations on these seasonal Christmas lights I was taking pictures of. So I said, yeah, I gotta do another shoot under more salubrious conditions and give this lens a fighting chance, which I did. It's now May, and I went to the park, and it was like 51 degrees out, which is better than 25 degrees out. And it was in this sunny weather, and I stopped down to 5.6, 8, 11, 16, and some 22. So that's under normal daylight conditions at the park, and this thing did really, really good. This is a really nice lens. Out of all these short vintage zooms I have, this takes the #2 spot. And it's really a close call to the #1 spot, which is the Canon 28 to 50 millimeter 3.5. This lens was easy to focus at all its settings. I mean, it just snapped right into focus, and you can tell I'm in focus. So that was surprising. And I highly recommend this lens if you want to get into a vintage zoom. And it's a nice ratio for walking around and stuff. And it's usable in the pinch at 3.5. But 5.6, 8, 11, 16, as usual, is your sweet spot for photography. And 50 millimeter, like I always say, has a shallow depth of field. It's sort of like a telephoto on these digital cameras, the APS-C size cameras. And you can see the shallow depth of field, so you're pretty much stuck with, if you want a wide range of sharpness as your pictures, to 16, 11, and a little bit of f8. 22, was sharper than the Pentax A zoom, and this is definitely better than the Pentax A, without a doubt. Without a doubt, this is a good lens. I highly recommend it. You should get one, and always get a lens hood with these old lenses. I think that helps a lot. So there's not much else to say about this, except it's got excellent build quality, and This is the FTZ adapter. This is a dumb lens. It doesn't have any electrical contacts. So, but the camera assumes that you must have a Nikon lens on it, and I think it treats a little bit better than if you put a dumb adapter or some other lens on it. So without further doggy do, let's go right into the photos, and then you could decide, which is good. There's a whole series of these now that you could look at, and if you're a Nikon guy and you're thinking, well, yeah, I like this lens, I'll get one. Or if you're not a Nikon guy, it may convert you. Personally, I'm a Canon guy, but I recognize it best when I see it. This is a decent lens. I really like it. Let's look at the pictures. By hapless happenstance, I slapped this lens on the Z50, and I was going to take some pictures of my phlox or mountain pinks, and there's some sort of weird butterfly flitting around on him, and he was chill enough to let me get within a foot of him and take these pictures. Now, these are all 1:1 center crops, which means they're sort of magnified view, but I got within 1 foot of them. I was able to use the magnifying, the live view magnifying zoom to get a decent focus, and I just snapped away. And I was very pleased with the way they came out. So this lens, the Zoom NIKKOR 28-50, is really good for doing close-ups. Now I notice I always go from 50 millimeters to 28 millimeters. I don't really use anything in between, which I find amazing. That's something that's recently noticed. I never use 35 millimeters or 40 millimeters or anything in between. It's usually right to 50 to 28. Now, this lens is sharper than the Pentax A 24 to 50 millimeters. There's no doubt about it. It's less aberrated. But the Pentax 24 to 50, the only advantage it has is that it goes to 24 millimeters. And on the wide angle end, that makes a big difference. But if you can live with the 28 to 50, then I highly recommend this lens. Absolutely, without a doubt. And I was shooting mostly at f8, 11, and 16. Some 22s on the close-ups if I could, if it's bright enough. And I didn't shoot anything at f3.5, nothing at all. I didn't even bother. But this whole series of pictures where I'm doing similar scenery and close-ups and some unique pictures, you could see what all these lenses could do and not do. And actually, this is a pretty good lens. I have my doubts about it because I took it out in the cold weather. And this is the thing. You want to go out and take pictures of cold weather? You can't. Well, sure you could. If you know you're going to take cold pictures when it's cold out, you can always acclimatize the lens by leaving it someplace cold. It doesn't even have to be on the camera. If it's going to be cold, like less than freezing, you put the camera on the porch or leave it in your trunk of your car or something, and then you just pop it on the camera when you're ready to do your pictures. Here's a 1/10 of a second, f16 ISO 100. I wanted to capture the water motion, and I actually was able to hold the camera steady enough to keep the rocks sharp looking. So this leaves, and this lens looks sharper than they do on the Pentax, without a doubt. Even though I stopped down to f11 or f16, they just look sharper to me. Now all the lenses will look sharp if you have an extended object which has a hard lead edge. That tends to make them look sharper, without a doubt. The bridge, it's like one of my standards. And it looks a little bit sharper to me than the Pentax, without a doubt. This lens was easier to focus than the Pentax. Even stopped down when I was focusing in the live view magnified view. I was able to hit the focus really nice. And this way, whatever my depth of field was, the subject was in between, right in the middle of the depth of field. Ancient astronauts built these walls, and then they left, and they never came back, and we have to scratch our heads and be mystified. Why did they do this? Because the old humans are stupid, and they didn't know how to do anything. Well, then it seems like modern humans are pretty stupid, and they don't know how to do anything. So there's that. Here's some more close focusing. Look at that bee. That's amazing. I was definitely at f16. There seems to be more depth of field here than the Pentax had. The Pentax was hard to focus. There's no doubt about it, the Pentax was hard to focus. Some of these were at f22.